you don't have arrangements for geriatric care or old people's security. So pension is an absolute must. It is not enough if Tamil Nadu and Kerala and a handful of southern states fight. We need to get much of the country on board. They would give money to women in Bihar just on the day of the election and call that an incentive. So we need a refixing, a rejig of center-state relations.
After a gap of more than 2 decades, the Tamil Nadu government has reintroduced an assured pension scheme, a move that has triggered sharp political and economic debate in a poll-bound state. While the government says the decision restores social security for employees and pensioners, critics argue it runs contrary to national pension reforms aimed at containing financial risk and may place a long-term strain on the state's finances. Is this a case of welfare economics reasserting itself or a risky promise driven by electoral pressures? Let's talk to Economist Venkatesh Athreya to understand the economic logic, risk implications and real impact of this pension scheme. Hello sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Sir, Tamil Nadu government has introduced this new pension scheme at a time when the state is gearing up for elections. The scheme is expected to benefit close to 6 lakh government employees in the state. To implement this assured pension scheme, the government will make a contribution of 13,000 crore to the pension fund, and it will also increase its contribution some 11,000 crores annually as its share. This amount is said to increase every year in line with salaries. From an economic perspective, what factors might have driven this decision or pushed the government to take this decision just beyond electoral considerations? Because opposition parties say this is purely an election gimmick.
The question to ask is, when the DMK got voted to office in 2021, it had made a specific promise in its election manifesto, saying it would restore the OPS. So the question to ask is, why has it taken so long? Not why it's being done now. And also, it is not strictly the OPS that they are bringing in, they are slightly modified version. And that's understandable because the state government is facing very severe fiscal pressures. And the bottom of that is basically the union government continuing to deny the state its legitimate share of resources and revenues. So under the circumstances, I'm sure elections may have played a role in the decision, as also the reactions by opposition parties.
They call this as an election gimmick.
Yeah, but they would give money to women in Bihar just on the day of the election and call that an incentive. So, it's a political gimmick that the opposition is playing. I think the DMK government has done the right thing by finally delivering, if not 100%, but a good 90% on that promise. So I have no problem. Economically, this is not a great stress because, you look at the data over the years, and it's available in public domain, the total payout on account of pension and similar such schemes in the state by the government has always been around 20% of the state's own tax revenue. And they're looking at future state revenue flows, and they try to attract investment, grow the economy. The economy grows, there will be more revenue for the government to take from. So it is not a static fund. It's not like there's one fixed amount of revenue and each year the share will go up. No, it can be stabilized and made sustainable.
Sir, under this Tamil Nadu assured pension scheme, government employees will be assured guaranteed pension equivalent to 50% of their last drawn monthly salary.
Yeah.
And the employees will contribute 10%. While the government meets these additional funding requirements, the contribution from the employees will be 10%.
Yeah.
But some of the employee unions are unhappy with this
10%.
This 10% being deducted from their salary. And they say, the contribution from the state government is almost nil for the scheme.
How is that true? Because the state government is obviously putting this, what you mentioned.
The initial amount.
No, not only the initial amount, but also annually 11,000 crores plus. So that is simply not true. The state government is not putting any money in. But because the state government wants to guarantee the employees a certain pension, not leaving it to the vagaries of the financial markets and stock markets, it is insulating the workers' pension from speculative financial considerations. So it's a good thing, in fact, because this is what workers wanted. They want an assured pension. not a speculative stock market related fluctuating pension. So this is okay. I don't think there's a problem there.
The union government moved many pensioners to the national pension scheme in way back in 2004, aiming to reduce long-term financial liabilities. But Tamil Nadu's decision appears to go in the opposite direction. What does this say about state's fiscal philosophy and priorities?
You see, it's a very tricky question actually, because at one level, both the then previous ruling regime, which was led by the Congress, and its allies, and remember that the DMK was a part of the alliance that was there at the center in 2004. It was not that it was not part of it. So it is quite familiar with that whole argument. On the other hand, so two major parties, Congress and BJP, and their formations have been both supporting the idea of the national pension scheme, which is quite unfair to the employees because you're demanding a contribution from them whereas you don't ask anything of the corporates. You keep offering them concessions day after day. So I think it's a long-standing demand of the workers. Pension is basically contribution for a lifelong contribution to the output of the country, and you don't have arrangements for geriatric care or old people's security. So pension is an absolute must. All civilized modern societies have pension schemes, and they can be publicly funded, partially funded by the beneficiaries. So I think the argument that Government of India apprehended increasing liabilities and therefore offloaded transition from the old scheme to the new scheme is not entirely valid. First of all, if over the years, this is all part of a larger framework, which is the neoliberal policy framework, privatization, globalization, and deregulation. So over the years, both major political parties and their allies have pursued neoliberal policies. The DMK is not an exception to this. It has also been following neoliberal policies. But the DMK has another track, another part of its heritage, which is more progressive, historically rooted in social inclusion, some kind of justice and all that. So they've been under pressure. And these guys are working. I mean, the problem is perception. You may find bad experience at the government desk, right, from the officer or employee concerned. That may even be a more general experience. But I've also seen, and I worked with government on health and education and so on, I've seen government employees working way beyond normal hours of work. Very dedicated and very hardworking. So, you can't kind of stamp everybody with the same, oh, they don't want to work kind of thing. Corruption is a different matter. And corruption is not peculiar to government employees. Corruption is there in the private sector just as much. If you go to a large private sector firm and if you're supplying them some item, then you will be very nice to the guy who's doing the orders. So, I think that this is justified. I think that they have had a long-standing demand and they have fought for it. So that's how things get done. Things don't get done by generosity. They get done by struggles.
How can state government afford to allocate huge funds for pensioners while struggling to get funds for basic infrastructure projects and projects like metro rail, reimbursement of the right to education fees from the union government?
They can't depend on the union government. That's quite correct. You're right. But, the fact that the union government is not implementing its commitments under the division of resources proposed by the Finance Commission is something that should be highlighted and they should be criticized for it. You can't put the onus entirely on state governments. As far as the state government is concerned, yes, there are many claims on its resources and it's getting less from the union government. There needs to be a restructuring of center-state financial relations. Unfortunately, I know that the 16th Finance Commission has given its report to the government, and I suspect that this commission will also tend to centralize revenues in the hands of the union government. That tendency has to be fought. And there, it is not enough if Tamil Nadu and Kerala and a handful of southern states fight. We need to get much of the country on board.
Yeah, but at this juncture, do you think Tamil Nadu government coming up with this new pension scheme has to allocate funds for the scheme? Is this viable for them?
Obviously,
and is this necessary?
They didn't just do it like that. They've been on the anvil for a long time. They constituted a committee with one of the additional chief secretaries, Gagandeep Singh Bedi, an officer known for his integrity. They went into the issue. They had a finance secretary also on it. They had consulted the finance minister, school education minister. All of that they set out in the government press release. So they've done their homework, they've done their calculations, and they feel that this is doable. That over the next 15 years, they made some projections of the state's own tax revenue, and they feel that the liability on this account can be kept down to roughly between 14 and 15%, or maybe maximum 20% of the state's own tax revenue. So it won't be dependent on the generosity of the union government. Of course, the union government may throw a spanner in the works, keep appropriating more and more money from the state, but that has to be resisted. And I think the government has done its homework before announcing this. It took a long time. People are very unhappy, but Jack Torgio persisted with this struggle. Nothing comes without that, no? Over 20 years of struggle. So those who are commenting negatively on this do not understand the issues. Yes, one can always tweak the scheme this way or that, make it a little better. One can demand a good work culture. That is different. Let's separate that question of work culture from entitlement of a worker to a lifelong period of employment. If you fall ill in the old days, who's going to take care of you? So, it's important.
What will be the sizable percentage of government employees in the state?
Very small. So it's not like a huge liability for the state. And they're critical to the system. They're the ones who deliver all the programs. See, it's funny because we're discussing this, but when it comes to military expenditure, nobody discusses anything. Is that because of the perception that whatever goes to the military goes to save your security? That's not true. Corruption is not something that's not there in the military. I don't think any military officer would claim that there's no corruption in that department. But somehow there we say national security, here the workers don't matter. It's an attitude question. I tend to support. Whatever, I may have my criticisms about government employees and all individually, but that's not the issue.
Critics argue that guaranteeing pension costs without actual reforms could strain the state's finances in the long run. Do you think the state's fiscal health can sustain this scheme over 2-3 decades?
Right. See, first of all, what do these guys mean by actual reforms? They have something in mind, which is basically no government. Neoliberal utopia where everything is done by the corporate sector. No, it won't happen. So government has to be around. It has to pay special attention to the needs of the weaker sections. So schemes have to be created and delivered, and somebody has to do the delivery. See, every scheme requires a delivery mechanism. It requires paperwork. If you don't have paperwork, you will say CAG will write something saying, oh, there are no records are there, they're all corrupt. So, it's easy for critics to say whatever they want in their heads. But a state government under a lot of pressure and with continuing centralization of resources by the union government has a very tough job on its hands. And that doesn't excuse what wrong things they do. But I'm saying in principle, subpopulation of government employees at all levels deliver an important service to the population on behalf of an elected government. The elected government is elected. It's not, set up by business people. Of course, the government, unfortunately, often is seen as serving the business more than the community. That's a different matter altogether. It has to do with the class character of the government, if you ask me. But state government is legitimate. It's not some, entity that was thought up by some big tycoon. Of course, the fact that the union government seems to practically deliver all its benefits to Adanis and Ambanis might create an impression in people's minds that governments are partial. That may be true, or that's something separately for another discussion. But here it's a very simple issue. There is a legitimate demand from the employees for a long time. The DMK, when it came to power, promised it would deliver. It has taken a long time, but it has done some delivery. Not 100%. Obviously, the requiring employees to contribute is a case in point. They are not supposed to contribute, but some people are making that an issue. But given the fiscal constraints, they've taken that into account. The point you were raising, they've taken into account. That's why it is not, they are making the employees contribute a bit. It's okay. I think it will work out. We'll wait and see. Anyway, it's too early because they've not yet made all the rules, and we'll have to wait and see what the rules look like.
If substantial funds are allocated to this pension scheme, some other areas of public expenditure might face cuts or delays, right? Do you agree with this?
Why should they? If you're able to raise revenues in the next 10 years with better industry, better taxation. See, after all, GST, take an example. Now, GST had two bad aspects to it. I've said this many times. One, it is centralizing everything, making the state governments powerless, appropriating their powers of taxation. Second, it is an indirect tax, so it hurts the poor more. Now, recently, in a very big gesture, government of India decided, we will reduce the GST rates. And they pretend to be the great warriors for the poor. It was done by the GST Council. At other times, they say GST Council in all the states are in it. Now they will say we did it. They were celebrating 1 lakh crore collection in GST and all that. I remember we had a discussion on that earlier, and it's atrocious. The poor are badly hit by GST. Now they have lowered GSTs, which is a good thing, but the states are hurt, no? Whenever the government of India offers corporate sector big tax concessions, the states lose out because they are entitled to a share in the corporate tax revenue. So all these are done without consulting them. So we need a refixing, a rejig of center-state relations. Within that framework, one can talk about what states should do. But more general point, I agree. Governments have to be prudent, manage themselves fiscally well. It doesn't mean you don't tax the rich. You interpret prudence as basically not taxing the rich, because the narrative is, oh, they invest, they create jobs. Of course, our Prime Minister and Finance Minister went to the extent of saying corporates are the creators of wealth, which is rubbish. I mean, the entire COVID phenomenon tells you that the workers are producing wealth, not the corporates. So, anyway.
Fine. So, for ordinary pensioners, what would be the key benefits of this scheme compared to what the scheme existed before? Okay. How far will this change their financial security?
It will improve it. You see, first of all, they have done away with the minimum period for pension eligibility. So, even if you don't have 10 years of service, you still get a pension. A minimum pension is guaranteed to you. Second, they have said we'll take the last month's pay, not the average of the last 12 months pay, which will be an improvement for them.
Yeah, can you explain that math? Because under this assured pension scheme, they have declared that the 50% of the pay drawn in the last month of the service will be considered. Yeah. Whereas the old pension scheme, that is the unified pension scheme, the average of the 12 months.
Both unified and the old pension OPS scheme, also.
They used to give the average of the last 12 months basic pay.
Exactly. Unless my increment falls on my 12th month, the average of 12 months will be lower than what I get if I get only the last month.
In the last month, okay.
So last month is a better deal for the workers, for the employees. And that's not going to be a big increase. It's more a kind of a good feeling, feel good kind of factor. I don't think it will cause a big problem in terms of liability.
Sir, as per the CAG report for 2023 to 24, the report says Tamil Nadu government invested the CPS accumulations in LIC and treasury bills that yielded lower interest than the general provident fund rate. But I think now they are switching to the general provident fund. What's your opinion on this change?
CAG is talking about something else. CAG is talking about the apprehension that in future liabilities will increase and how will you deal with it and so on. But evidence suggests, from whatever calculation that committee has made, by the way, that over the next 12 to 13 years, 14 years, they will be able to manage comfortably. There will be no significant increase in these liabilities. The share of the state's own tax revenues, it will stabilize at about 20% or a little less.
21% to 20%.
Which is all right, the point is to, in the meantime, carry on a national campaign for restructuring of center-state relations. Because states have far more work. They have far more responsible for development, all kinds of ways. What does the central government do anyway? You can actually dissolve half the central government departments. They don't need to exist. Devolve it, give it to the states, let them, they know what's the condition on the ground. Everything you want to centralize. Now education, they want to centralize, the NPS, new education policy, so NEP. So, I'm strongly for a multinational country like India with different linguistic nationality groups, different cultural, historical backgrounds. You should give them maximum autonomy. Union government needs to look after defense, foreign affairs, and one or two important involving interstate coordination. What is their business to decide how a school should be built in a village in Tamil Nadu? They have no business there. But it's appropriation, and this is done by previous governments also, not just this government, but we must resist the tendency to centralization. If anything, state governments also can be faulted because they have not been willing to devolve powers to elected local bodies.
Government has given the assured pension to the government employees, but how about the other unorganized sector, people because they form the major chunk of the population and they contribute to the economy of the state. How can government take note of this?
No, they should. In fact, there's been long pending demands of the scheme workers like Anganwadi workers or auxiliary health nurses or many other scheme employees, or now gig labor force. See, we are discussing in the context of state government this pension scheme. But you are not looking at something else that is happening, which is these 4 labor codes that the union government has unleashed, which denies workers practically any rights. So it is true that both state governments and central governments tend to, except for 1 or 2 exceptional governments, like I said, the Left Democratic Front government of Kerala. Otherwise, generally, most state governments look at these scheme workers as a liability. They want their work, but they don't want to pay them much. So those have to change. Tamil Nadu is a little better, but the north and all that, it's terrible. So I think there is a legitimate question that you have raised. How about the other segments of the working population
because
who don't have this kind of
form
clout.
the major chunk of
Yes, of course,
workforce of the state, and they also contribute for the economy of the state.
Right. How did
compared to the services provided by the state state government employees. These workers, many of them are daily wage workers, and they do not have any assured monthly income.
So
how
will they get it? They should get it in the same way that the workers now got it. They fought for it, no? You don't get anything without fighting for it. So the scheme workers have been fighting. Other sections of the working people have been fighting. Just now we had a big All India Trade Union Centre had its conference. CITU had its national conference. They made some important decisions about taking up the demands of scheme workers and other. Across the country, Government of India has been trying to get free labor from poor people. So, and meanwhile giving massive concessions to the rich. So I think that has to change. The narrative has to change. People should be the center of development, not big bosses. That's my view.